Hey folks, thank you for coming to this talk. So by way of introduction, my name is Avi Burra. I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, very early Nostr user, right around the time I think the previous panel referred to it as the Jack Dorsey hatchening. So that was in December of 22. That's pretty much when I started using Nostr. Also an author, the first book of fiction, I believe, on Bitcoin, or where Bitcoin is a very central theme. It's called 24. You can find it on Amazon if you search for Avi Burra 24. So the title of my talk is Culture is Upstream of Adoption. So three big words here, and let's unpack them one by one and start with the simplest, upstream. A is upstream of B if B happening needs A as a precondition, right? So if I say A is upstream of B, for B to happen, A needs to happen. That's upstream, fairly easy. Let's move to the next one, which is adoption. Why am I here talking about adoption? So we'll start with a small backstory here. My Bitcoin and freedom tech backstory. I got interested in this space sometime in 2016. I'm an engineer by background, and I came in because of the cool tech, and number go up. I won't lie. Wasn't just Bitcoin. It was the Bitcoin adjacent space, crypto, blockchain technology, so on and so forth. So it took me about 4 years of being in that world, working through those technologies, making the mistakes, trading shit coins, getting wrecked, all of that before I actually realized that there was only one meaningful use case for this technology, and that was peer-to-peer cash, and Bitcoin was the only one that did it. And there was more to it than just that realization, right? Because with this freedom money, it enables a world of incredible abundance potentially of it's a just money, right? So a fairer world, less inequality, not just for future generations, potentially even in my lifetime, that we'd be able to achieve it if we found Bitcoin. So that was my Bitcoin adoption journey. And then, I view Nostr and Bitcoin as two sides of the same coin. You have freedom money, which goes hand in hand with freedom communication, right? Which is what Nostr enables. But we'll get into how Nostr fits into this in a moment. We'll talk a little bit about Bitcoin for a second, and we'll start by looking at two archetypes. While still on the topic of adoption, right? Two archetypes of orange pillar. So there's Alice. Alice is cerebral. She's intellectual. She's very well read, and she cares deeply about driving Bitcoin adoption. And then you have Bob. Bob also believes in similar things, right? Has very similar values, but he's laid back. He's more of a storyteller. By the way, I'm guessing these are AI-generated stock photos. So if someone actually comes up and says, actually, that's my sister Persephone, her name isn't Alice. Sorry. So let's talk a little more about Alice's archetype, right? As we said, she's cerebral, she's really well read, and then she spends a lot of time explaining and talking about monetary policy and Austrian economics because she spent a lot of time studying that herself. She's very passionate about these topics. She has also studied decentralized networks, and she explains the importance of these communications protocols. She also expounds on the ills plaguing our current system. We all know what's wrong. All the things that are plaguing the system. Alice explains that to folks who might not be as aware. And she also sometimes demonstrates the cool tech that we have, right? She helps someone install a Lightning wallet, sends them some sats, creates that little wow factor. And this is a great approach, right? Alice makes the intellectual appeal to folks. And I would say, certainly my Bitcoin adoption journey was largely intellectual. Once I reached a stage of tinkering around with other technologies, adjacent, quote unquote, adjacent technologies, I then spent a lot of time reading books like the Bitcoin Standard, read more about Austrian economics, also decentralized protocols, so on. And so I was convinced at the intellectual level, and I suspect a lot of us in this room were as well. My question is, while it's a very valid way of orange pilling someone, can this scale to hundreds of millions of people? Can this scale to billions of people? So let's look at the second archetype, Bob. Bob's a storyteller. He uses various forms of media to describe the allure of a Bitcoinized world, right? What a world would look like on a Bitcoin standard. He sort of paints this picture either through stories or through other media to talk about this aspirational, these beautiful ideas, right? He uses art, his stories, films, music, even food. And what Bob's trying to do is he's trying to draw people into the culture, bring them in, like a pull method, as opposed to Alice's method, which is more of an intellectual push method, right? Pushing ideas onto people versus creating this beautiful imagery and pulling them in, which is what Bob is doing. So this is an emotional appeal. So if you think about Alice's orange pilling method, she's administering the orange pill here in the brain. And what Bob's trying to do through stories is administer the orange pill in the heart. And this, I will assert, and I think some of us know this, can scale to billions. And if you have any doubt about that, just look at any major religion, right? God reveals himself through stories. It is through cultural means that great ideas are propagated. So we talked about upstream, which is the easy one. We talked about adoption. Now let's talk a little bit about culture. So what is culture? Culture is an amorphous collection of the stories we tell, the songs we sing and listen to, the art and beauty that we admire, the food we eat, so on and so forth, right? And in some sense, culture is a glue that binds communities together and helps them grow. And if you're a storyteller like Bob, you can certainly use existing legacy tools to propagate this culture, to showcase the beauty, to tell the stories. Like you use X, you can use TikTok, you can use YouTube, and certainly in the Bitcoin community, you have a lot of folks who do that already, right? You have multiple people posting short videos, film, even art on these legacy media platforms. But there is an issue here, which is all of these individually are single points of failure. They're controlled by one single entity, a company, an individual, and they can shut you down. They can shut your cultural expression down if they disagree with your culture. And that's the problem. And Nostr fixes this. So before we get into some of the cultural aspects of Nostr or how Nostr can propagate that, I went through an interesting experiment a few days ago on Nostr, where I posted a note saying, explain Nostr via negativa. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, via negativa is a logical approach of describing a complicated concept, and you do so by talking about what it's not rather than what it is. So by way of analogy, if you're a sculptor looking to sculpt a horse out of a block of marble, you start with a giant slab of marble and you chip away the parts of the marble that are not the horse until you get to the horse. Right? So that, in a sense, is via negativa. It's a logical tool that's you're acting as the sculptor, sculpting away everything that isn't the truth that you're trying to get to. And I got some interesting responses, so I'll go through a few of them. So the first one is Nostr is not an app. And this is very true, right? Nostr is an ecosystem of multiple apps coexisting that ideally interoperating. That's the goal anyway. And that can do multiple things. Nostr is most decidedly not just a social media app, right? That is just the gateway into Nostr, the Twitter clone, you have the Damuses, the Amethyst, Primal, and others. That's the easy gateway into Nostr, but it is so much more than just a social media app. It's a way of rethinking how human beings communicate ideas and culture, for that matter, over the internet. Nostr is not a platform. I think that follows from the other two. A platform is typically centralized. There's a single entity controlling and making decisions on how information flows. Nostr is a protocol. It's not a platform. I like this one specifically. Nostr is not a soul-sucking parasite that feasts on the manufactured negativa for abusive corporate gain and reign. And presumably the person who said this, what they meant by manufactured negativa is the social media algorithms that try and keep individuals' attention, right? So the more attention they can keep, the more advertising they can sell them, right? And they found the trick to keeping attention is to keep feeding them outrageous content, content that evokes our more baser instincts, right? So in Nostr, you are the algorithm. You can curate whatever information you're seeing. Now, there are certain clients that do have an algorithm. I think Primal's one example. But you can opt out of that. You can go for a simple chronological feed. So in Nostr, you are the algorithm. And then finally, Nostr is not a place where your ideas can be silenced for wrongthink. So this is an interesting progression of the via negativa, and all of this basically leads us to this conclusion, which is, in other words, based on all of this, Nostr is the perfect conduit for propagating this culture, right? The Bob archetypes way of trying to orange pill people. Nostr is the perfect conduit for that. And we're already seeing the beginnings of what that cultural propagation could look like. So I'll walk through a few examples here. And this really is the other stuff, right? So for those of you unfamiliar, which is, I don't think anyone in this audience, but Nostr stands for notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. So notes obviously applies to the simplest social media use case, right? Microblogging clients and so on. But the other stuff is everything else, the cultural narratives and tools that can be built. So we'll start with music here. And we had QW and Open Mic on the previous panel talk a little bit about Wavelake. Wavelake is a Nostr client on which musicians can publish their music and they can get zapped for that. And they talked about Ainsley Costello, a young up-and-coming musician, a sort of a country, rock, pop, hybrid musical style. And she started off on Wavelake, and she was the first person to receive 1 million sats in zaps on Wavelake. They talked a little bit, I believe, I think Open Mic mentioned Just Loud in the previous panel, who's a more established musician. And he's had millions of streams on Spotify with no revenue. As soon as he started using Wavelake, he got a lot of zaps. So for the first time, his music was earning him an actual income. One I haven't mentioned here is, I have a 13-year-old son who is an aspiring musician, and he plays the piano, guitar, and a little bit of the trumpet. He records this on GarageBand, adds some effects, and he's been posting on YouTube. And then about 6 months ago, I convinced him to post something on Wavelake, and within a few days, he had 50,000 sats in zaps. So Ike's music, young, talented musician. While still on the topic of music, there's another interesting music client called Stemster. It's a collaborative music creation client. So here, as a musician, you can record simple beats, maybe simple vocals, or a simple guitar riff as a MIDI stem, and then upload that to Stemster. Someone else can pick that up, add more layers to it, and then upload that. So you can see the progression of that MIDI from maybe a single instrument to multiple layers, and potentially, right, as more people keep adding to it, you can have a community-created masterpiece. So Stemster is a really interesting client. You should check out. We had Open Mic in the previous panel started Tunester. It's a live music streaming client where people where they hook up with venues, and they could stream the music from those music venues live, and on something that in the legacy world would be something like a Twitch stream, but with zaps enabled, and you can zap those live performances. Another interesting one is Waveman from the folks who brought us Wavelake, which is a music player for all the music that's on Wavelake. And it's sort of an homage to the old Walkmans. And as you're listening to the music, you can zap the artists. Moving on to film and video, we have Max DeMarco, who's an excellent filmmaker. I think one of the previous panelists, LSAT, might have alluded to him. And, Max is most famous for, he's made several excellent documentaries, so you should check him out. But he's most famous for the Nostrica documentary. So Nostrica was the first Nostr conference that took place about a year ago in Costa Rica. And then Max traveled there with his camera and filmed quite a few people. And it's an excellent introduction to Nostr and talks about the issues with legacy social media platforms and how Nostr solves all of those. But Max is a guy who posts a lot of his movies on Nostr first. And I was having a conversation with him recently, and he was talking about how even though he has several more subscribers on his YouTube channel and on several more followers on X than he does have on Nostr, he's never made a single dollar on any of those platforms. Even though he gets the fewest views on his Nostr notes, he still most of his revenue comes from there. Another quick example is Julian Figueroa, Kinetic Finance. He posts short, educational, funny content on TikTok. He's recently started posting some of his clips on Nostr first. Not all of them. Work on him. Also, interestingly, he traveled to Peru recently to film one of the Bitcoin circular economies there. So I'm hoping that film, when it does come out, is a Nostr first. And then there is an app, Zach Mayer. I don't know if he's at this conference, but a young developer who's been working on Nostr over the last year or so. If I'm not mistaken, he was part of the sovereign engineering cohort that first sovereign engineering cohort that wrapped up in Madeira recently. He created this app called Flare.pub. It's a YouTube replacement, if you will, on Nostr. It's a Nostr client where users can upload videos. So you're seeing the first signs of these clients trying to take on these legacy giants in video sharing and film. So the stories and long form writing, these are really great tools for propagating culture, the cultural narrative, and drawing people in. And there are already a couple of blogging clients. There's Habla.news, which is a Nostr client, and Yakihone, if I'm pronouncing that right, another long form blogging client where people have been posting news articles, they've been writing essays, and it has a lot of folks read those. So you have that. Then there was some guy recently who released a book called 24, and one of the things he did, I don't think too many people know this, but before the book was actually released, I'm going to stop referring to myself in the third person. One of the things I did was the early drafts of Nostr, as I was writing them, I was posting one chapter a week solely on Nostr, nowhere else, and getting feedback from folks and incorporating some of that feedback into Nostr. And as it turns out, the book itself is a story about a young man's hero's journey into becoming a full-fledged Bitcoiner. So it's a way of, I was thinking about it as a way of drawing people into the culture with a hero's journey. But I leveraged Nostr to start with. And even food, believe it or not, has a place on a part of Nostr culture. Prime example is Zap.cooking. So Seth, who's a long-time Nostr user, had an idea that for a client where people could upload their favorite recipes. If you like those recipes, you could zap them. So Zap.cooking, you should check it out. There are actually several hundred recipes. There are several cocktail recipes as well. And I was surprised to find many of them were in different languages. So it's an incredibly diverse set of recipes that's already been built up over there, and some funny ones as well, worth checking out. So in summary, on all of these cultural tropes, well, actually, before we start summarizing, there are a few others I neglected to mention. And that's so Fountain, for instance, the podcasting app Fountain, they are looking very closely at Nostr integration. In fact, Oscar Merry, in a conversation I was having with him a few weeks ago, was contemplating. I mean, I don't know if he's done this yet or if he actually will go through with the execution, but he was thinking about stripping out Fountain completely and building it up from the ground up as a Nostr client. But if nothing else, he can, some of the coordination that happens on between the podcasts, right? The conversations and the comments, he wants to have those as Nostr kind one notes for the more technically inclined there. So in summary here, you could be like Alice, right? It's a completely valid and noble approach to try and teach to people and convince them to adopt freedom tech at that intellectual level, right? I mean, many of us are here today because of folks like Alice, who led us here. Or you can be like Bob, where you can tell people stories, you can show them beautiful art, you can entice them into the culture by appealing to their emotions, and most importantly, you could do it on Nostr, where you're free. So if you do accept these basic premises from Bob's approach, which I talked about, and we'll just go over them real quick, which is this peaceful revolution towards a Bitcoinized world. The only way we achieve that revolution is if as many people adopt Bitcoin as possible, right? If it's just a handful of us in this room, great. We've had a great time. We've been to some fun conferences, but we haven't really done anything other than within a small group. We haven't changed the world for our children as such, right? So if you accept that our peaceful revolution can only take place with maximal adoption, if you accept that a cultural pull, as opposed to an intellectual push, right? But a cultural pull is the most scalable way of achieving that maximal adoption. And if you accept that Nostr, with its unsilenceable and unerasable canvas, is the best medium for doing that, and you want to be this guy, and if you're a developer, you should think about what tools you can build to enable culturally relevant stuff. I have a couple of examples here. Truly decentralized video sharing is a big one. So I talked a little bit earlier about Flare.pub, Zach Mayer's YouTube replacement. And that's great, right? But I think it's just the beginning, because the videos themselves can be uploaded by multiple folks with Nostr accounts, but they're all being stored in a centralized database. So in theory, someone could knock on Zach the developer's door, and ask him to take it down, right? Or confiscate those servers. So I don't know if we've cracked how to do this, or truly decentralized video storage, but that's a big one to look into, because that would make film truly censorship resistant. Another one is a marketplace for physical art and trustless auctions. By the way, Nostr is moving so fast, I won't be surprised if after this talk someone comes up and says, "What are you talking about? I already built a client for trustless auctions." But I'm not aware of anyone that's working that I've used that works well at scale. So I'd love to see something like this, potentially an ebook marketplace as well, where writers can post their what they've written, and people can buy that with Zaps or with Sats, ideally. Or if you're a creator, and by the way, being a creator is not some special skill that only a certain few have. I honestly believe that every pleb here is a creator, right? We have that incredible creative potential within us. So if you are a creative pleb and you have an idea, just don't wait for the right moment or the perfect moment to leap in. Just that moment is now, so just do it. And the way you can do that is reach out to a developer who can help you execute. A great example is Zap.cooking that I talked about. So Seth is not a developer, the guy who created it, but he had this idea for creating a recipe sharing and recipe zapping website or a Nostr client, and he did. And he reached out to a couple of developers, and within about 4 or 5 weeks, Zap.cooking was out there, and now it has hundreds of recipes on it. The other thing you could do is reach out to me, and we can because I've spent the last few months thinking about how we can bring more efficiency to this culture formation, this culture propagation process, both on Nostr and beyond. But really, the culture I'm talking about here is obviously promotion of freedom tech. And one of the big issues I see is we have some fantastic creators in the Bitcoin and Nostr community. Several examples come to mind. I mean, I talked about Julian Figueroa, there's Carla and Walker, the Bitcoin couple, several others, right, making amazing educational videos, telling stories, telling funny stories. But it's incredibly fragmented because they're creators, right? And instead of focusing solely on the creation, that's only part of their job. The rest of the time, they spend doing all the operations, back-end work, promotion, social media, search engine optimization, marketing, post-production, editing, so on and so forth, right? So a lot of those operational tasks, while incredibly important and critical to producing high-quality content, there needs to be a way of streamlining all of that and removing some of the duplication. So in talking to a few folks, there's this concept of a media company that we came up with, and we tentatively called it NIP21 Media. Now, this is still in the concept phase, right? This is not a fully functioning company. And really more than a media company, I actually think of it more as a culture factory. And what it does is it creates a common infrastructure for creators so that it reduces duplication of administrative work and all the operations work that I talked about, post-processing, editing, so on and so forth. And really just frees the creators to focus on what they're good at, which is creating incredible and beautiful art. And then, through this process, create an economy of scale because you have multiple folks leveraging a common infrastructure. And ideally, a flywheel emerges out of it with value for value monetization as a key revenue pillar, as opposed to the more legacy tools or the legacy methods like advertising, subscriptions, creating walled gardens, what have you. I don't think value for value is there yet to be the sole source, but I think there is a place for it in a monetization play, and ideally that its share of an artist's monetization increases over time. And this common infrastructure, I'm hoping, creates that reality. And then the goal of this company would be to provide services, these back-end infrastructure services to creators, but also incubate in-house content, create content internally. So I'd put a few months back, and I'd shared something similar at the Nostrville conference at Bitcoin Park in November, but it's a simple business architecture that I put together that would show what this common infrastructure would look like, and then what are the different types of creative verticals it could enable, and took a leaf out of our favorite protocol, Bitcoin, and took a layered architecture view to it. And let's see if it's not too small. Well, we'll work with this. So there's the base layer, and the base layer consists of all the basic back-end things that would go into any kind of art creation, right? So you have audio, video editing, post-production, there's marketing, there's organic social, search engine optimization, UI, UX, application development. So this is the base layer. These are the shared services. Think of this as a horizontal capability that crosses across all different types of art and media. And then you have the vertical. So we'll start with news and podcasts. And the reason I picked this is the folks we were working with, there was the Nostr report. I don't know if you can, it is a little small here, but one of them up there is the Nostr report. The other is Plebchain Radio. So Plebchain Radio is a weekly podcast I do as a Nostr Nest with my co-host QW there in the audience. The Nostr report is a newsletter that's curated Nostr content that a few folks from Nostr were putting together. So these are existing assets that would greatly benefit from having a shared set of infrastructure services, and then of course any other stuff in the news and podcast vertical. There's entertainment, publication, live events, and education. We can take a look at some of the things in each. In entertainment, this includes film, short, long, documentaries, TV series. Publication could be books, even music. Live events could be meetups, conferences, such as this one. And then education, of course, tutorials, explainers, and so on. And this is not to say that we try and boil the ocean on day one. This is just a list of possibilities of all the different kinds of content and artistic creation that could come out of having a shared set of infrastructure services. And we'd pick the ones that have a roadmap for picking the ones that made most sense in the short term, and then prioritizing medium and long term ones to verticals to expand into. So this is quick overview of NIP 21 Media. Still a concept. If any of you, again, going back to the previous thing I said, if you accept all of those premises, right, that cultural propagation is the way of getting to maximal adoption, you want to be like Bob, in other words, and you think that this makes sense, I'd love to chat with you. Let's brainstorm. Let's see how we can take something like this to execution, right? You don't have to be a CEO. If you have skills in any of these horizontal capabilities, post-production, marketing, social, so on and so forth, please do reach out and love to chat. So with that, I will leave you with if you're familiar with Nostr, a very common and endearment that we have on Nostr, GM. So, this is how you can find me, Avi Burra. If you want to find me on Nostr, the easiest way is primal.net/Avi. You can also find me on X, but I'm certainly not going to share that one in this presentation. And then I hope this QR code works this week. If you do want to read my book, you can scan this. If it doesn't work, just go to Amazon and Avi Burra 24, and you'll get a copy. So, any questions? QW at the back. Yeah, so the question QW, my co-host, podcast co-host, just asked is, talk about some of the gamification that I did in my book 24. So there's, one of the things I actually didn't mention is, part of drawing people into the culture is obviously creating these beautiful narratives and drawing people in, but it's also fun, right? Fun is another incredible tool we can use to draw people into the culture. And so while my book primarily is a story about a young man dealing with the sudden passing of his father, trying to uncover his secret, in the process learning about Bitcoin and becoming a Bitcoin maximalist, so a hero's journey at both levels, right? The 5 stages of grief and 5 stages of Bitcoin maximalism. In what I did put in there was a 24-word seed phrase. I hid that in there, scrambled order, and there was a 17 million sat bounty that was held in the address that 24-word seed phrase would unlock once you found the right order. And there were several clues within the book which you'd need to decode to get the right order and then find it. So about 3 or 4 days ago, someone was able to crack that, and they took the 17.1 million sats. Yeah. Tom. So Tom's question is, how much was that worth in dollars? My unit of account is sats, Tom. I think something like $11,000, $10,000 or $11,000. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. I mean, it wasn't that much wasn't 11,000 when I put it in there, but. Anyone else?
So for the Nostr community, where would I start?
Yeah, look, the top of the funnel for Nostr, right? The low-hanging fruit is the social media use case. That's how you dip your toe in, and then they're typically, these tend to be familiar. They're Twitter clones, or they look, reminiscent of Twitter or any of these other social media apps. So, if you're if you have an iPhone, iOS user, Primal is a good starting point. Damus is good too. If you're Android, Amethyst. I think there's Primal for Android as well. And what that allows you to do is get a sense of the kinds of conversations that are happening. And so that's the entry point, the social media use case. But there are other resources, and I can send you some.
Just attached to your phone number.
No.
To keep.
Yes. Yes, your real world identity is unknown to the protocol. Everything you do is your public-private key pair, and that's it. And that's connected to your social graph. That's connected to everything that you ever communicated on that protocol. It's only dependent on your public-private key pair. Tom again. Yeah. So the question is, there's folks in the audience have a podcast and they'd like to promote that on Nostr. What are the steps they should take? I think, so zap.stream is a live streaming service, and you should certainly use that. It'll, you have your Nostr npub, right? So people can watch that live stream. They can zap it if they like what they're hearing. So that's one if you want to do video. If you want to go audio only, Nostr is a good one. Thank you. You could do both, yeah. One more. So the question is, can I talk about whether there are any spiritual aspects in my book for the spiritual Bitcoiners in the room? So yeah, look, one of the things I've done. This is a hero's journey. The story is a hero's journey about a young man coming to terms with his father's passing and going through the 5 stages of grief, which I've sort of mirrored with the 5 stages of Bitcoin maximalism. It is a surrealist book, right? It's a magic realist or surrealist book. So there are certain things that happen in the book that are obviously not possible in real life. One of which is this young man starts having these visions in which the secrets about his father are being revealed to him. But part of it, through that process, he also finds out things about the nature of non-duality, right? And consciousness. So yeah, that's, without revealing too much about the book, that's what happens through some of these psychic visions that this young man has. Yeah, the question is, can you upload videos to Nostr? And yeah, there are a few websites, or I wouldn't call them Nostr clients. They're just Nostr adjacent services. So Nostr.build is a good service to use. It's where you can upload images and videos. You can pay in sats and get extra storage, so you can do higher definition uploads. So Nostr.build is one. Flare.pub, which I mentioned earlier, the attempt at a YouTube replacement is another one. So the question is Jeff Bezos on the other side of the video storage and the image storage on Nostr? The short answer is today, yes. So in theory, you could get rug pulled by Jeff Bezos, which is why one of the things I mentioned is decentralized video storage is a really important use case. Even if it's not Jeff Bezos, even if the developer decides to go completely sovereign and host the servers in their basement, they can still be tracked down, right, and get a knock on the door and have to turn those servers off. So I think once the decentralized video storage nut is cracked, I think we'll be in a really good place for sovereign content creation. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, for someone who is deeply involved in multiple streams of artwork, right? But whether it's meditation, yoga, or physical art, or others, right? How would they go about sharing that on Nostr? So the physical art, you have sort of off-band transactions that happen today, right? Where someone posts a photo of or a sculpture that they've created, or a bottle of wine for that matter, right? And this has happened already. And they said the first one to zap me 100,000 sats gets this. So that's happened. People have zapped on Nostr, right? Zap is a way of sending sats on Nostr. And when that number was reached, they got shipped that physical item. Now, this is not a scalable transaction, right? Or transaction framework. It's an off-band one-off. You can have a handful of one-offs for this. So I think one of the things I did mention is a marketplace as a Nostr client, right, for physical art would be something a developer should be focusing on. And I'm sure someone is. I might just be unaware of it. So that's the physical art. I think for yoga meditation, again, I would say zap.stream, right? You could just do, or Nostr Nest for that matter. You should certainly look into that. So the question is, have I had any experience with Flockster, and what are the meetup organization tools that are best today on Nostr? So Flockster, for those who are unaware, is and that was, I believe, also built by Zach Mayer, the guy who created Flare.pub. It's supposed to be a meetup or Eventbrite replacement. And QW here, my podcast co-host at Blockchain Radio, and also one of the organizers of the Nostr Phoenix, Nostr PHX meetup. He has organized a couple of events on Flockster, if I'm not mistaken. So there are others who've used it as well. So I haven't personally used it for any meetups, but I think the experience in general has been good. I mean, as with any Nostr client, it's a little rough around the edges, and there's a reason for that, right? It's you have these centralized companies that have raised VC money by selling equity, and so that they can have organized teams of developers, having them sprinting at problems. And Nostr, most of the development is open source. People are relying on small grants, and it's a little difficult to find that level of coordination, at least in the same level of time that you have for centralized apps. But Flockster is doing well. Now, there's another one, Terry here in the audience, and he's going to be speaking in a couple of hours. Terry, I keep forgetting the name of your Comingle. That's right. It used to be called Confster, but so Terry, you here, who's also a Damus contributor, by the way, made an app called Comingle, and that's more, not quite a meetup app, but it's more of for conferences. You can have schedules and so on Nostr. So there are examples, to your point, on apps that are helping people meet up and organize. So the question is, has anyone on Nostr attempted a document archival client for legal documents? Not that I'm aware of. Having said that, I guess you could do it on a non-Nostr based client as well, right? You could just upload them, digitize and upload them onto any server, because today the issue is, even on Nostr, storage is still centralized, right? The coordination is decentralized, but the storage itself is centralized. And we need a solution for that, to say this is truly censorship resistant, right? For that next level. So I'm not aware of that. Thought I saw another question from here. No? If not, well, thank you, everyone.
Grandpa, why do you have so much Bitcoin?
Well, it all started in the year 2023 when I attended a conference called Bitblockboom.
What's Bitblockboom, Grandpa?
It was a conference where people talked about Bitcoin. This was way back when we used something called the US dollar for money.
What? Bitcoin wasn't always the world's money?
If it weren't for great speakers at Bitblockboom like Jimmy Song, Adam Curry, and Preston Pish, we'd all be living in pods and eating bugs. Instead, I was able to avoid fiat enslavement and secure generational wealth.
F***ing legend.
Be the legend your grandchildren deserve. Experience the best Bitcoin conference out there and join the Bitcoin revolution. Bitblockboom, the only conference for true Bitcoin maximalists. Book your tickets today at bitblockboom.com and use the code BBB1 for a special discount.